The action-packed adventure of Tim Patton, the Missouri Kid, Western Outlaw. Don't miss the exciting adventure of the Missouri Kid. Canyon Heat. Wild West Outlaws Western comic series. Comic book version by Daniel Belay. Narration by Natural Reader. So, Missouri, tell us about your nearly death experience in the canyon. Missouri Kid was thinking to himself, if only they knew the dangers that awaits you in the surrounding region, and the pain sensation of being shot bad in such a hot desert canyon what possibly could do to a man. Well boys, it started about 4 weeks ago. These are the orders of Jake Glidden, the Missouri Kid's sworn enemy. The feud started in Sweetwater, a thriving cattle town at the edge of the desert. The young blonde, babyface gunfighter hit town with nothing more on his mind than a thick steak, a comfortable bed and a friendly game of poker, but banker Glidden's boss killer, Smiler Trask, didn't aim to let Missouri Kid enjoy those delights. Smiler shouted, "Hold it, Missouri." Missouri replied, "I never saw you before, Smiler, but I recognize you from what I heard. Stand aside, I'm not here for trouble." Smiler replied, "Better slap iron, Missouri. I'm gonna kill ya." Missouri Kid knew it was a setup. Smiler Trask was fast but he was no fool, and he'd have other guns somewhere in the quiet street. So Tim Patton did the only thing he could. "Hold it, Max," Glidden said, "kill Missouri." The man on the roof was thinking to himself, I aim to do it, even if I gotta kill Smiler at the same time. Smiler set Tim Patton up, but Missouri Kid ain't easy to kill. Missouri called out to a fellow in the street, "Is there a doctor in Sweetwater, mister? Where's the sheriff?" The fellow replied, "Doc Alden is at the Double X Ranch, and we got no sheriff since Mr. Glidden said the town ran out of money." Smiler asked, Am I gonna die?" Tim Patton responded, "You might have a broken bone, Smiler, but the slug just about broke the skin. Something in your shirt pocket saved you." The rifle slug hit the payoff money, Smiler. All new money, fresh from the bank. Tim Patton thinking, the banker ought to be able to tell me who paid Smiler. Tim Patton asked the banker, "Mister, I'd like to know who." "I know you, you're Jake Golden, the sheriff in Devil Rock Ridge is still looking for you." Jake Golden replied, "Come into my office, Missouri." Missouri Kid uttered, "So you used the money you stole from the Devil Rock Ridge treasury to open your own bank?" The banker replied, "No one here but you knows about it, Missouri. I saw you riding into town and I sent for Smiler Trask to have you terminated. Trask bungled the job but I won't. I'll tell everyone you were holding up the bank. They'll believe me because you'll be dead." The banker shouted, "You always were tricky, Missouri." Missouri replied, "I want you alive." A few folks near the doorway reacted, "Oh dear. We should help Mr. Glidden." "And why? Jake Glidden never helps anybody else." After Missouri taken control of putting down the banker, he approached the onlookers and said, "Glidden's real name is Jake Golden. He's an embezzler and con man from Devil Rock Ridge. I'll bet he stole the folks blind here in Sweetwater." One of the town's businessmen replied, "We can find out in a hurry. We'll go over his books, Tim." A citizens committee locked up Glidden with Smiler Trask. These two bushwhackers would never bother anyone again. Missouri Kid stated to Golden, "I'm riding on. Mr. Boyd and the citizens will see you get what's common to you." Mr. Golden replied in anger, "I'll go free Tim Patton, and I'll hunt you down. One way or another, you're going to pay for this." A day later. As Missouri rides out of town, he thought what happened back there, the steak was tough and the bed was lumpy, but Jake Golden is behind bars where he belongs. A few days later, Glidden and Smiler manages to set themselves free from jail and had headed out of town. One night Glidden and his men made camp. One was an Injun named Apache Joe, who had wandered off a short distance and had come back to tell Glidden and the others, "Somebody built a fire out there, boss. Apache Joe will be back in a minute." The Injun had wandered near and close in enough where Tim Patton had made camp for the night. The Injun listened in as Tim Patton began to think out loud, "I'll cross the devil's bathtub tomorrow, Then I'll find good water and plenty of game. Apache Joe then wandered off quietly back to the associate's campsite and spoke to his boss of what he saw and heard. The boss replied, "Spit it out, Injun, was it the blonde, baby-faced gunslinger?" The Injun motioned his head to allege yes. The boss then said, "Where's he headed?" The Injun replied, "Missouri ride tomorrow towards Valley, bad place. No water, even snakes die there, on other side is stream, forest, much hunting." Smiler stated, "I'm gonna take Missouri's cayuse, then shoot him in both knees, boss." Glidden shouted, "You fool. Last time you tried to shoot Tim Patton, you almost died." Mr. Glidden went on, "We'll ride all night to reach this devil's bathtub before Tim Patton. We'll bushwhack the Missouri kid there, my plan is foolproof." Mr. Glidden shouted as they rode, "The devil's bathtub has one way in, and of course one way out, the Missouri kid will never make it out when we are done with him." Missouri was awakened by the first son, and his thirsty bronch. Tim Patton mamboed, "All right Chiquita, I'm awake. I was having a nice dream amigo." Missouri said to his bronch, "All right, I'll let you have some water, then I'll dig deeper and fill the canteen." The kid put coffee on to brew and impaled some dried beef on a steak. A lean breakfast, but it would do. Tim Patton thought out loud, "A lot of men die in the desert, with water only 3 feet away, if they dig in the right place." As the kid rode through the canyon he thought to himself, "I could dig 50 feet deep in the devil's bathtub and never find water. I've got to get out of there pronto. Temperature down here gets up to 130 degrees. I'll have to give the horse most of the water if we plan to get out of here from the other end." Tim Patton spoke to his horse, "It's about 5 miles across amigo, we'll take it slow and easy." Meanwhile above the cliff Smiler mentioned to Mr. Glidden, "I see dust near the other end of the canyon, boss. Is it whom I think it is?" Mr. Glidden replied, "It's the Missouri kid all right, and it will not be long he be heading towards this way below." As soon as Tim Patton was in their sight below, Smiler mentioned to Mr. Glidden, "I can pick Missouri off from here, boss." Mr. Glidden replied, "Be patient, I want to see his face when the first bullet ricochets in front of him." Tim Patton uttered to his horse, "We made it, amigo. There's the other end of the devil's bathtub." Then it happened. Patton shouted, "Whoa, boy, whoa." Mr. Glidden above yelled out, "Missouri, drop the rifle, boy, and get off the horse." Tim Patton roared out to his bronco, "Make tracks, amigo. We're heading back." Missouri thinking for sure that Smiler was up there with Glidden. Patton responded to himself, "I'm sure lucky they missed." Tim Patton thought out loud, "Damn, they plugged both ends." On the other end above the cliffs Apache Joe called out, "Leave horse or we shoot horse." Missouri blared back, "Hold it, the horse didn't hurt anybody." Apache Joe called out, "Put rifle down, put down gun, or we shoot horse." Missouri was furious and said, "If I ever set my hands on you, I'll." The Injun cut in, empty canteen on ground. Missouri thought to himself, "That's too much." Missouri attempted to drink some water from the canteen before emptying it and dropping it to the ground, but the Injun warned him, "Not drink water." Then quickly Apache Joe fired his rifle and shot the canteen out of Missouri's hands. It looked really bad for the Missouri kid. The Injun and his partner rode down from the cliff towards Tim Patton below with their gun sight set upon the kid's visual. Apache Joe said to his partner, "Take guns, Josh, I get horse." Timothy Patton asked, "What about me?" The Injun responded, "Boss want you to stay, you die here." Shots were fired from the Injun's rifle at the Missouri kid. Missouri was hit below the left shoulder upon his chest with one of the slugs. The impact had threw him into the ground. Patton next forced himself back up and staggered forward. In his agonized state and anger, Tim Patton loud out, "You bastard, you planted one bullet in me and it hurts really bad." Missouri thought to himself, "They're driving me back to Glidden and Smiler to finish me off." The Injun and his partner rode with a slow pace behind Tim Patton, forcing the kid to stumble forward on foot, nonetheless the fact he was also bearing the pain of his gunshot wound. Apache Joe has likewise kept firing warning shots from his rifle to get Tim Patton to move faster. Missouri thought out loud, "Glidden will want to kill me himself, Smiler will be pretty anxious to put a bullet into me too." The injured Tim Patton wiped the sweat from his face. The heat waves shimmered off sun-baked sand, and the kid didn't see Glidden until he was about 50 yards away. The Missouri kid in his weak condition looked at Mr. Glidden and uttered, "Go ahead, shoot me." Mr. Glidden replied, "Not yet, Missouri. In fact, you don't have to die at all." Mr. Glidden went on to say, "Beg, Patton. Ask me to spare your life. Plead with me. Crawl." The agonizing, light-headed kid replied, "Mr. Glidden, I don't want to die." Mr. Glidden responded, "That's more like it, boy. Did you hear him, Smiler? He's not so tough, he's a coward." It was just enough to trigger Missouri emotion to take action, and Timothy Patton rushed to grab Mr. Glidden's rifle out of the hand of his evil opponent. Smiler shouted, "Watch it, boss." Mr. Glidden just about to say, "Smiler, ease." However, before Glidden had a chance to finish his sentence, a slug from the rifle in the hand of Patton has struck Glidden in the heart, which then causing the evil man to drop from his horse to his death in the dirt. Smiler quickly aimed his sight on the Missouri kid and said, "The game is over, Missouri." Missouri responded quickly and replied, "Not yet, Smiler." Smiler was not as fast as the kid, and Missouri manages to shoot him off his horse, where he rested unconsciously upon the ground. Apache Joe had next made his turn to rush the kid. This caused Missouri to quickly grab Smiler's pistol and mount Smiler's horse. Both Apache Joe and Missouri charged after each other. The Injun shouted, "Missouri, crazy man from heat." Apache Joe manages to send one slug into Patton's right side of his lower ribs. However, Patton was able to exchange bullets back at the Injun and caused Apache Joe to be shot dead off his horse. Missouri then turned the horse around quickly and manages to kill the fourth outlaw. Missouri rested, trying much to catch his breath and for his painful bleeding gunshot wounds to gradually cease. He was weak, hurting, and yet able to keep himself stable. Tim Patton then forced himself back on the horse and rode back where Smiler laid. By time Missouri got back to Smiler, he was already out of unconsciousness and was trying to force himself upwards. Tim Patton faced him and shouted, "I ought to kill you, but better yet, I rather leave you here in this heat. You're wounded and you never make it out of here alive on foot." Smiler replied, "Kid, if you notice, you're also wounded real bad with 2 bullet holes, you're bleeding fairly good, and in your condition you ain't going to make it out of here alive either." Tim Patton was feeling the afflictions, but yet he continued to bear it and said, "I just have to chance it, mister, at least I have a horse to ride out." The wounded Missouri kid rode west out of the Devil's Bathtub, leaving one enemy in the furnace to defend for himself. Barely enough, Missouri manages to make it back alive to civilization. First thing is to find a doc and get his wounds attended to. The doc mentioned to Tim, "You're lucky to get back here alive, kid." The Missouri kid took the advice of the doc and rested for a few days to get his full strength back. Tim Patton uttered, "You know, boys, I had never seen Smiler again since after my experience in the canyon. I figured that Smiler never made it out of the Devil's Bathtub." One of Patton's friend replied, "Too bad about Smiler, I reckon he cashed his chips." And Missouri finally finished off by saying, "And that is how it all happened, boys." The end. Comic book version by Daniel Belay. Narration by Natural Reader.